Welcome to the Ops Experts Club with Aaron, Taryn, and Savannah. This podcast will take you behind the scenes of some of the finer details of multi-million-dollar companies. These ops experts have dealt with operations for scaling companies and well-established businesses with anywhere from small to large teams. If you've ever been deep into the details of a major company, then you know how much it takes, and these conversations are just for you. Welcome to the Ops Experts Club podcast.
Experts Club, here we are. Good to see you again today, my fine friend Ben Clatterbuck. How are you doing today?
Very good, sir. Thank you very much for asking. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I got even better when I heard you text me earlier this week asking me about Belize, because you know I'm on an ever constant quest to convert people to Belize. So the
Yes,
fact that you're
sir.
thinking about bringing your little newborn Linnea with you and your bride down to Belize made me excited, bro. I'm not gonna lie.
We'll see if the U.S. government wants to get us a passport fast enough that we can make it happen. But if they say expedited shipping on a passport and they can get it to us, I think we're gonna make it work.
So crazy. Newborns, man. A newborn needs a passport. Feels so weird. Like you and I were talking about that. How about the birth certificate? Seems so much simpler. Her face is going to look so much different by the time she uses this the next time.
I know it's like who's gonna really look at that too? They're like, oh, your baby's traveled around the world. Like this let me use a birth certificate. That's
Oh
all
man.
we really need.
When you go and take the picture, like they're not supposed to smile. So tell her there's no face. She can't. No, there's no emotion. She just has just like flat face. That's the way they make you do that. So good luck on that side.
Oh man.
Anyway, hey man, I'm excited today. We've got a pretty incredible guest. And so all of you who are tuning in for experts today, just know this really cool stuff today. Top 1% franchise broker, multi-brand franchisee, Inc. 500 franchisor, and author and Forbes contributor. Like this guy is a good dude. He's a good friend of mine. Ben, let's bring Jon Ostenson up to the stage. Jon, thank you so much for joining us today, man. It's great to have you.
Yeah, excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, Ben and I talk a lot about franchising, because, for us on our side of things, not only do we run ops for franchises, there are quite a few franchises that we do operations for, where we come in and help them with EOS. I know you and I have talked a lot about EOS and just rolling out standard L10 meetings. You'd be surprised how many franchises, even though they have a good system, don't necessarily have systems in place for, hey, how about like weekly check-ins? And do you know your numbers? And does the whole team know what the expectations are? And so just establishing a weekly cadence has been something that I feel like we've really been able to help out franchises with, but also we deal with a lot of independents. And so there's a lot of angst in the independents sometimes towards the franchise, right? Because they're like, those freaking guys, and you have these independents over there that are, hot and hostile about their company and competing franchises coming into their space. So I think Ben and I actually indirectly talk about franchises quite a bit, but it's awesome to have somebody who's actually an expert. I feel like Ben and I dabble. We created an FDD for one of our biggest coffee clients, 16 coffee shops and a roastery, and they were a franchise. And that was the next step right before they got acquired. And so we went through the months of back and forth with the attorneys, like ironing out every fine detailed point. And then obviously we've worked in the underbelly of reading people's FDDs and different things that are the bylaws for the franchises. But it's so cool just to have somebody that's an expert on the topic on the show today. So thanks, man. Thanks for bringing your wisdom.
Yeah, no, appreciate the kind words. And, in most circles that I hang out in, I do get associated with the F word franchise. And part of that is, in recent history, have been on both the franchisor side of the table as well as the multi-brand franchisee side myself. But I've got good people running my businesses and allows me to help others all around the country get plugged in. And I love educating. And my humble belief is that opportunities in what I call non-food franchising do
Yeah.
create better paths to business ownership for most. And, so many people have that innate desire to get into business ownership, don't know how to connect the dots and where to start. So I love coming in and helping them.
Yeah, man. I know you're the CEO of Franbridge Consulting. That's your business. And it specializes in the term that you just gave us, something that seems like you've coined. And you've even written a book about it called non-food franchising. Maybe you could break that down a little bit for our listeners. Food franchises get a lot of front and center, right? But you actually have specifically said, I'm going to segment out and away from food. And so questions like, what does that mean? And why no food?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'll say I love the food guys. We need them. We support them. If you own 50 Jimmy John's, you're doing just fine. But my humble belief again is that there are easier ways to make money. And the vast majority of our clients would agree. And so, we're talking about industries such as home and property services, everything from dumpsters to installation to gutters to, all these kind of non-sexy, understandable, Amazon resistant, cash flowing businesses. Then it's things like health and wellness, everything from mental health to testosterone therapy,
Right.
categories like automotive, fitness, things that people will always spend on regardless of the economy. So you think about kids, pets, seniors, those are always going to be businesses where there's market demand for them. So, it's interesting when you step back and look at the world of franchises, there are roughly 4,000 franchise brands in the US. There are always new ones being added. But if you take out food and if you take out hotels, which I personally believe are two different animals, that leaves about, close to 2,000 businesses out there. Now, some franchises are in growth mode, some aren't, some are saturated already, and there's not a lot of territory available. But that's where we come in to help our clients find, the franchises that have the leadership teams that have been there, done that. They've got the competitive advantages. They've got financial models. So love just, again, educating, and happy to take the conversation wherever you'd like today.
I love that, Ben. I feel like a lot of the things he just said, like you're speaking Ben's language. I feel like Ben is always talking to me about his little investment strategies and people he's listening to. And even as you start talking, I just met Ben and I have worked together for almost a decade. I just know the way his brain works and just saw him begin to lean in a little bit. Ben, what are your thoughts on that? You got some questions alongside of that? Because that piqued your interest, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple questions. I guess the first one is, what do you see right now as the biggest sector for franchises that's growing? I mean, when you talk about automotive, I mean, I feel like home services is probably one that's just constantly on the move. Is there one that you see sort of dominating right now when it comes to bringing new franchisees in?
The hottest one at the moment, I don't like using the term hot, but the one that's grown the fastest in the last couple of months would be a men's testosterone clinic. I mentioned that men's health. There's
Oh,
such a demand. It's becoming mainstream now. And if you could be the first player in the market to really create a brand around that and what's a very fragmented spot, but then I look at senior care. I think I did 13
sure.
placements last year with a great senior care provider. I mean, you've got the silver tsunami. Everyone's getting older and there's huge demand. It's all about how do you get the right caregivers. And so they've created kind of a better mousetrap in how they go about that. But no, to your point, Ben, you're exactly right. I'd say over the last couple of years, really, even predating COVID, home and property services, people are staying in their homes or fixing them up, and again, these can be non-sexy businesses or sometimes they're kind of cool. Maybe I'm a part owner in one that does custom pull-out shelving for your kitchens and pantries, and I personally have a driveway business. I've got a concrete paving and line striping business up in Minneapolis that's run by some really good people. And that's more of a B2B business. I've got a custom orthotics business down in South Florida that does 3D printing for insoles and, footwear, for a whole variety of consumers, but, the older population is kind of a sweet spot. So that's why we put it down there. But I just love the diversity. And I mean, I personally invest in all sorts of asset classes across the real estate sector, as well as public equities. But I love that franchising component of my portfolio. I think more and more investors like yourself, Ben, are waking up to the fact that, hey, there's tax advantages to business ownership,
Sure.
and there's a role for it to play in my portfolio.
Ben, what a smart dude. Let's line out John's brand right now. Let's just talk about how smart this dude is. He's like, hey, so I used to do franchising and I did really good. And then I realized I could start consulting for all the franchises out there. And then as I'm under the hood of all the franchises, identify the best ones to invest in. So while I'm connecting franchisees to franchisors, then I can also make my investments. So I feel like we're talking about just like a
Right.
win-win-win. John's so smart, bro. I think that's amazing.
Well, I appreciate it. No, you're on to me. And I will say, and this could be helpful to your listeners too, when you think about whatever respective industry you're in, my choice to niche down and essentially cut out half of the industry was one of the smartest moves I made. So many clients come to me because they say, hey, we know you're the expert in non-food and we don't want anything to do with food for whatever reason. Maybe the margins are low due to food waste or what have you. But again, we support the food guys. We love them. But my focus is kind of on the other half of the market. And that was a strategic move that's really paid off.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Ben, especially you being under the hood. Ben and I have spent the last nearly decade in food, right? As far,
Mhm.
Obviously we do a lot of operations. We do a lot of operations for a lot of different kind of verticals, but I do think there's been a big segment of what we've done, which is coffee, drive-through coffee. I mean, a big spin, especially Pacific Northwest, which is where Ben and I are located. That's been Ben's beginning. And that was a segue where he and I met. And then we've gone a long way with coffee since then. But I will say you did touch on something there that I thought was sneaky and way to tuck it in, but like it is really true. And that is like two of the big things within the coffee industry is, hey, be really clear where your margins are because that margin can disappear real fast if you're not keeping a real close eye on it. And then number two, like waste. Like so much of your capital is infused back into the business on something that does have a shelf life, does have like control of your base level employee that's working for a minimum wage and does not understand the way that cash infused into a business, you just locked up your capital by inventory that now is in their control, that they can really drop profitability just by the way they treat it. Is that some of the reasons why you do try and stay away from food, just because of erraticness in the behavior patterns of people that control profitability?
Yeah, I'd say, and again, I like coffee more than I like kind of food. I mean, we look at
Sure.
frozen yogurt and that's no longer a big thing like it was. I do think customers' tastes change over time. And with
Yeah.
food, in most cases, it's a larger investment from a capital expenditure standpoint than a lot of the opportunities that we work with. So you're taking a little more risk, if you will, in that regard. But you are dealing with hourly employees largely, and you are in some of these other industries too, in all fairness. But but the operating hours, I mean, that scares a lot of people. And I'd say most food companies are looking for owner operators. They want someone that's really hands on, that has that skin in the game. And about half of our clients are looking to be owner operators. The other half are looking to put a manager in place day one. That's what we call it, executive model or semi-passive, semi-absentee, these different terms you'll use. And the beautiful thing is franchising allows for that in large part. Many franchise brands, they'd probably rather have the owner operator, the guy with skin in the game, but they're willing to support that manager. And standing up a business isn't easy. I won't sugarcoat it. But if you've got a strong franchisor on the sideline, they can help manage that manager, be that filler of support on a day-to-day basis and carry the water for you. It makes it a lot more doable to keep your day job or keep your existing business.
Sure. Sure. Do you see a lot of, or do you work with at all? Is it primarily people who are just getting into the franchisee game straight out of not having any business experience, or are these people who own businesses that they're looking to franchise, or maybe they did have a yogurt shop at one point and they're like, oh my God, I never want to do that again. I'm going to try and get into like self-storage or storage units or something like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really across the board. And, we work with everyone from their 20s to their 60s. And I'd say
Sure.
sweet spot is a lot of folks in their 30s to 50s that are popping their head up and saying, hey, I'm tired of building someone else's empire. I want to go build my own. Can you help me, show me how to do it? And so we do have a lot of people that are looking to exit the corporate world, very similar to myself. I spent many years in the corporate world, and so I can relate and understand. We do have a lot of existing business owners. Now, I will say some of them are too entrepreneurial, and I have to tell them that. They want to put their
Right.
thumbprints all over it. But then
Right.
a lot of them also say, hey, I love the idea of franchising because I know everything that goes into getting a business to third base. I'd much rather start there on third base with a support system on the sideline. I've got a playbook. I know there's product market fit. From day one, let's go execute against that playbook and, exchange best practices with other franchisees. And even upon the exit, I mean, with the business, I call it the trifecta, business ownership, because you're building cash flow, you're building an asset that's going to have exit value, and then you've got the tax benefits as well. There's been studies that have shown that franchises actually trade at a higher multiple on average than non-franchised in the same industry. So again, that's just one other component that oftentimes gets overlooked.
Well, I'm sure that, and the reason for that probably is, even if there's a strong other business that's a non-franchised model, it's typically built on the back of somebody's name, right? Or the back of the way that this guy did it or the way he ran it. And yeah, there was value when he or she were at the helm, but as soon as they step away from the helm, the question begins to be begged of, will those systems still handle over time? Or was that based upon the last regime that held it? And how strong is this kingdom truly? So I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, you look at different even cars on the market and ones that hold certain, asset value. There's obviously, there's a difference between a Toyota on the market and a Dodge on the market. There's different names that mean different things. And in my mind, I think that makes a lot of sense, actually, that the value is held by some.
100%. No, it's an excellent point. A lot of our clients come to us and say, hey, we've been exploring ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. That's a very popular term out there right now. I want to buy an existing business that's cash flowing, that looks, well, that's great. Looks great on paper. First off,
Yeah.
if you can find one, you can agree to terms. And once you do your due
Right.
diligence, if it all checks out and you get there before someone else, which all those, I've got clients that say we've been looking for years. Now we're ready to look at franchises. But they do like that fact, Aaron, because they would see that as less risk, the existing business. I would pose that it could actually present more risk because you're paying a premium for the business,
Right.
assuming that it's going to continue with the new leadership where you're not losing key employees. Whenever you have a change in ownership, you risk losing employees or losing the key customers, like you said, Aaron. So, once we change that paradigm in their thinking, oftentimes, more often than not, they end up choosing a franchise.
That makes sense. For that young 30-year-old, 20-year-old who's trying to get out of the corporate world right now, where would you say, I mean, obviously outside of working with you guys, even if they're just trying to get, their brain wrapped around this, what would you say would be the first step to them of, starting down this path of, owning a franchise? Would it be look at something small, maybe put some cash aside, and then come and talk with you and work through that? Or where would somebody begin?
Yeah, I'd say from the financial standpoint, most of the opportunities that our clients are getting into, when you look at the franchise fee, the startup costs, and several months of working capital, kind of in the 150 to 300 range for most of them. Certainly there's some that are well north of that. A lot of these service-based ones are in that range. That being said, a lot of clients are using SBA loans and using leverage. I would say from a net worth standpoint, every franchise system has a required net worth because they want to make sure that you're comfortable to buy a business. I'd say you probably need to be in the 150,000 minimum. If you're below that, then focus on savings. But no, if you're at 150, there are ways to leverage and make it happen. I'd say the first step, a little biased here, but come out to our website, download a copy of Non-Food Franchising. Happy to give a free copy to all of your listeners, Audible or digital, whatever they prefer. But I packed a lot of content into about 95 pages, and we've gotten great feedback that it really serves as a good primer to kind of get the juices flowing and help fill in some gaps in knowledge around franchising and how it compares to startups or to acquisitions and just types of industry and funding and what a FDD is, a franchise disclosure document. So I'd say that's a good first step, but then happy to engage and jump on a call with any of your listeners too. It's entirely free to work with us. I'm essentially a real estate agent, but for franchises. And so we get a referral fee on the back end. None of that gets passed on to our clients. So if you're in the market, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Dude, this guy is so freaking smart, dude. So freaking smart. He's like, hey, come and work for me. It costs you nothing, but I'm still going to get kickback whoever I plug in with. I mean, so brilliant. So kudos to you. And that website is the franbridgeconsulting.com. That's where they can go to get the book.
Absolutely.
Franbridgeconsulting.com is amazing. You said something, and I thought it was so interesting the way you said it. But you said some entrepreneurs, when they get in the middle of it, they want to get their fingerprints all over it, and I thought that was Ben and I had the conversation before we jumped on the show today, and we thought all the different things we were going to needle you with and ask you questions about, because you're promoted by some pretty big names, including the legendary JLD, John Lee Dumas, like promotes you pretty big, but John Lee Dumas is an entrepreneur of entrepreneurs, and you coined the saying of, you feel like real estate investors can be a great fit for franchising. And I'm like, how is that even possible? Because we work with a lot of those big name entrepreneurs, and I feel like those guys have their hands all over everything. And I just thought, how could they abide by a franchise model where they want to clip in? And how do you consult those guys out of it? It makes a lot of our listeners are in the entrepreneurial world. And I'm like, how does not compute. I don't even see how that could work. So talk me through that. How does that work?
Yeah. So I'm a member of the EO Entrepreneurs Organization. So I have a lot of folks that reach out regarding franchising. And again, many of them have moved forward and love franchises because of everything it provides. They know what goes into getting to that point. But I do have quite a few that are too entrepreneurial where they think they're the smartest guy in the room. They come in, they question everything from day one. Well, going back to my days at Shelf Genie, when I served as their president and I had franchisees all across North America that I was supporting with all these different diverse backgrounds, I'd say the two traits that made our most successful franchisees kind of rise above the pack were, one, their ability to work with people, which, that's any business, right? Internally or externally. And then secondly, it was their willingness to follow the system. They said, there's a reason why I bought into a franchise. I'm going to go execute against the system. I'm not going to come in and question everything. Now, a good franchisor wants their franchisees to be innovative and try new things within the lines. That's where innovation happens, but they don't want you to go off the rails because that affects them. It also affects other franchisees. They do have to keep some tight controls. So every entrepreneur is different, but it is interesting on the real estate side, to your point, Aaron. Right now, there's a lack of inventory. We all know that, of real estate, and there's a lack of good deals to be had, and interest rates are very high. And so we do have more and more real estate investors that are coming our way saying, hey, another tax advantaged alternative investment. I've never thought about it. In some cases, it may complement their real estate business. In other cases, it's just another piece in the portfolio.
Just a way to basically hedge the portfolio against what's going on right now. In essence, is that what you're saying? If the real estate business is down, at least they've got something else going on, somewhere else in the country.
Yeah. Oftentimes the real estate creates passive income. This creates active income. So there are other things you can do from a tax standpoint, which I'm happy to go down that rabbit trail. I kind of nerd out on that stuff. But No, I'd say, some of them are getting into things like, I mentioned insulation. That's a $50 billion market. Most people can't even name a brand in that space, right? And so there's such an opportunity, and you've seen some fast growth there. They may be getting into businesses that are tangential to their current properties that they're managing, let's say Airbnbs or long-term rentals. They're saying, hey, I'm paying a service provider. In some cases, like there's a property management franchise a bunch of my clients bought into. They're like, why don't I just do this for myself, vertically integrate, and then serve others as well, their peer group. So that's one path. I've got others that are more commercial investors that say, hey, I know how to site select and find the locations. I've got the connections out there to kind of get a, above market average deal, on some space. And then I'd love to just plug in a franchise where I can put a manager in place. Probably half of our clients are getting into things that require that physical customer facing brick and mortar location. About half of them are getting into businesses that can be run remotely, at least not from a big build out of a retail space.
Yeah, that was actually my next question, is how that fits into, like, if you're seeing that divide of people got really used to working from home and were like, I never want to go back to an office again. So if you're seeing, was it COVID that kind of saw this push of like, how can I have a franchise that doesn't require me to like a self-storage lot, for example, like somebody who's you've got to buy a big piece of land to put that on. You've got to have an office there that you're working out of. Is there a lot of growth in that sector of, how can I manage this remotely from home and it just takes care of itself, in Nebraska while I'm over here in Washington?
Yeah, I'd say, if it's your first foray, having the business in your backyard probably makes sense. It just reduces a little more of that friction, if you will, to getting it going. But I do have a lot of clients. I had one the other day in Jackson Hole that started a business in Houston. I've got a business in Minneapolis and in Florida. I mean, that is not uncommon. But I'd say if it's your first foray, you may want to stick local. But there's so many businesses that are remote. And by remote, I mean just not having to have a physical location. It's more of a field-based business. A lot of the property services companies that I mentioned, fall into that bucket. You may eventually have some spaces you grow on but it's on the back end, it's subleased industrial space, let's say. But I think about like in-home healthcare, which I mentioned, or youth soccer. We've had a bunch of clients get into youth soccer. Soccer's never been more popular. World Cup's coming to the US. Like there's just all these macro factors that support that. It's a great cash flowing business, private equity backed. They're reinvesting in the company, and just huge opportunity out there to kind of complement current soccer leagues that are in place.
Wow. You're blowing mine and Ben's mind. We're like, look at all the franchisable ideas out there. Like, man, have been stuck in a hole for a while, apparently. But I will say, like, I think the thing that, like, as we start to bring it home, like the thing that you continue to underline that I think is so important as people are listening, because maybe you're listening and you're thinking, well, I'm in the middle of a coffee business right now. And what they're talking about today, how does that even apply? I would say this is, find your systems and live by your systems, right? Like I know for us personally, we own a business down in Belize that does coffee, and that is the key. We have 2 locations down there. It's all of our systems, and the business runs as long as the business is true to the systems. Where we start to experience breakdown, and Ben can tell you this, Ben came to me out of running 150 employees at all multiple locations. And like, if people don't toe the line on what the system is, that's when it gets scrambly. That's when it gets hard to manage. And I think that you bring us some really good points of whether you're in independent, listen to this, or maybe you're in a coffee franchise or in this, or you're in, like John's been talking about, non-food franchise. I do really think, like, trust the system. And I was going to say, I bet SBA loves loaning to like established franchise because they know the proven track record versus an independent that comes to SBA and says, hey, I want to seek you out for this loan. And they're like, well, give me your business plan. And they come out with their napkin that they've got it written out on. And SBA says, well, come on. But if I can point back to proven track record of these have been opened in like size towns as this, like size spaces as the one I'm looking at, I would imagine that's a lot more provable. And not to say that we should be following the trend of every governmental agency, but I do think, man, they do that because it's expected. Like there's an expected outcome because these things are living by rules and systems, which I think is super smart especially when you're talking about dollars and cents, right? Like don't put a gamble on something that doesn't have a proven track record and a really easy to follow A plus B equals C. Is that something you'd agree with, John? Is that something you'd follow?
Absolutely. And nothing's a given, success isn't a given, but the likelihood of success is a whole lot higher than obviously a traditional startup. But I love the quote, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your system. And that's so true. And franchising is all about processes and systems. And I'd say that's definitely some of that secret sauce. So I love all the work that you guys are doing for your clients. I mean, it's processes and systems. I mean, that's the most successful business owners I've seen, even outside of franchising, just through EO. It's all about the processes and the systems.
Yeah, I love that. It as you know, we wind up and we close out the show. I'd love for you to give people a way to get a hold of you, but I've got one last question for you too, and that is Ben and I look at P&Ls every day, all day. Like we look at P&Ls for businesses all the time, scorecards all the time, finances all the time. What would you say is a good profitability expectation for a non-food franchise? Ben and I probably have our secret ideas, and especially we know from the food industry that we've been in at least. But I'd love to hear like what you see on average for a profitability percentage for a solid non-food franchise.
Yeah, it's certainly across the board, but I'd say oftentimes your margin may be in that 15 to 20% range. Once it's
Yeah.
up and running and you covered some of those fixed costs and you're more in a variable cost model. Yeah, I like to give this example because I had 10 clients buy into this one in the past 2 years. It's a gutter business, gutter installs. They do a
Yeah.
great job, great culture, all that. All in investment on that, you're probably around 250,000 all in. And your average revenue within their systems right around 1.5 million in revenue. And I had a client that actually just hit 1.2 in their first year with this business. He shot me a note the other day, but 1.5, they're dropping about 26, 27% to the bottom line. So let's just round down and call it 25%. You're at, 375,000 to the bottom line on an initial investment of 200,000. Well, that's a pretty good return. And, again, you're building an asset that's going to be able to sell and write off expenses, all that. So that's an example. I'd say those margins are higher than some, but that gives you an
Well, that's
indication
good.
why franchising is resonating with so many out there right now. I think the secret's getting out.
So
Sold me.
smart. Yeah, right. I think Ben and I can see sometimes those kind of profitability margins in coffee, but not every time. And that's the gamble, right? Is like you open a sucky location that you were so sure was going to kill it. And then you didn't take in a factor or traffic pattern changes or things that used to drive business your way has shifted. And then it's like, yeah, that profitability that was really performing well was very, very much built on the location and where you dropped it. And so like what you just said with the gutter business, who cares where that guy's located? Can he come out here and fix my gutters? And I can't have this be my situation. I need this fixed. I need this better. And so it's pretty impressive. I think it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And there's certainly a lot of businesses that carry lower margins. I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture, but oftentimes that's due to higher cost of goods sold, such as you would find in the coffee industry, right? There's a product component in addition to the service component. So it really is across the board, but there are some pretty neat opportunities to cash flow well.
Such a privilege having you on today, man. I appreciate you making time for us. If our listeners want to get a hold of you and they want to talk more about franchising, how can they do it?
Yeah, just come out to our website, franbridgeconsulting.com, FRAN bridgeconsulting.com. And, just share your email address. My assistant will reach out and give you free copies of the book, via digital downloads. And she'll also send you a calendar link. So if you're serious about taking the next step and learning more, I'd be happy to engage. Again, 100% free to work with us. So look forward to helping out wherever we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you, sir.
Love
So
it.
appreciate you being here. Ben Clatterbuck, always an honor to have you on the show as well. Thank you guys. I hope you guys have an excellent day. And all of our listeners, man, really check out Jon. He's a good dude. I know him personally as a dear friend, and I can tell you this is the real deal. Good-hearted dude, smart guy, as you've heard on the show today. So hope you guys have a great day, and I hope all the listeners enjoyed as well. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ops Experts Club podcast. New episodes available every week on Spotify, iTunes, and everywhere you listen to podcasts. If you're curious about how some of the biggest names in entrepreneurship have scaled their businesses to the next level, check out some of our best content on this topic by going to foundationsthatscale.com. You can find the link in our bio and do your part to improve as an ops expert.